You wake up in Greenwich, 5 a.m. The Jura espresso machine is already hissing. Through the window you see a perfectly manicured lawn and the hood of your new Rivian. It is the smell of money, order, and obligation. On your kitchen island sits a letter from Bank of America. It is a notice of a rate adjustment on your home equity line of credit. Your payment just doubled. Suddenly, without warning, you recall those 48 sleepless hours you spent closing that big deal last quarter, the missed birthdays, the midnight calls to your wife from the office. What was it all for? For this house? This car? This lifestyle? You did everything right. You worked harder than anyone you knew, and yet, here you sit, staring at the numbers, realizing that this entire construct, this glossy, socially approved facade, is hanging by a single thread, and someone just picked up the shears. That cold, sharp knot in your stomach is not a glitch in the system. That is the system working exactly as designed. It is built on one great narrative: hard work equals success. The more hours you log, the closer you get to the peak. It is a moral anesthesia that allows you to work yourself to exhaustion, believing every hour is another brick in the foundation of your personal sovereignty. But it is a lie. Machiavelli famously distinguished between virtue, the strategic power to build your own architecture of authority, and conventional virtue in its everyday, almost Christian sense. The system exploits those who confuse the two. The hard work narrative is not a harmless cultural value. It is a recruitment mechanism designed to turn you into a voluntary supplier of someone else's capital. The more effort you invest, the more fiercely you defend the idea, because the alternative is too painful to accept, admitting that decades of your life were wasted serving someone else's interests. Look at the American worker in Ohio between 1985 and 2010. His productivity surged 65%, while his real wages completely stalled. That entire surplus was swallowed up by corporate margins, all while those same corporate HR departments continued preaching the nobility of hard work. The problem is not that your strategy is slightly off. The problem is that you proudly reproduce the very system that exploits you, mistaking subjugation for nobility. So, if it is not about the number of hours you put in, what is it? The answer lies in a dimension the system deliberately conceals, because its entire foundation depends on your blindness to it. It is about the quality of your time, its invisible architecture. Every hour of your life belongs to one of three categories. First, there is the hour sold once. You trade it for money, the transaction is closed, and no asset is created. This is a type A hour. Second is the hour that is not only sold, but simultaneously builds an asset capable of generating future income without your active involvement. This is a type B hour. And the third category is the income flowing from previously built assets, requiring absolutely none of your direct time. This is the logic of type C. Machiavelli made a fundamental distinction between relying on your own forces, your own weapons, and relying on the forces of others. Salaried labor, selling your hours, is the ultimate existential dependence on someone else's weapons. Your entire life, from suburban Chicago elementary schools to your Ivy League diploma, was optimized to produce type A workers. You were rewarded for completing tasks, for attendance, for showing up. You were never taught to build an asset, because the system feeds on those who cannot see the difference. The entire American dream for the educated class is built on the idealization of the elite type A hour. Take a senior McKinsey consultant in New York, $400 an hour, the perfect image of success. But those are pure distilled type A hours. The moment the billing stops, the income drops to zero. Now compare him to the creator of an online financial modeling course on Teachable. He recorded the content once, back in 2019, and still collects passive income with 0 additional hours. The statistical reality is brutal. By age 45, most American men have a time portfolio that is 95 to 100% comprised of type A hours, without a single compounding asset. Realizing this is not just uncomfortable, it is devastating. It means the entire career trajectory endorsed by your parents, your university, and your first boss on Wall Street was designed to keep you trapped in Category A forever. The reaction to unmasking Type A hours is highly predictable. You think, fine, I will just get an MBA or a professional certification and move to the next level. This feels like a mature, responsible decision, the next logical step on the corporate ladder. But Machiavelli warned that a prince who relies on mercenaries is doomed. Swapping one employer for a more prestigious, higher-paying one does not change your fundamental dependence on someone else's will and resources. Your MBA diploma simply moves you into a more expensive tier of the exact same Type A system, where the stakes are higher, but the rules remain identical. This is the trap of prestigious dependence. Additional certifications and degrees increase the price of your Type A hour, but they never alter its nature. At the same time, they create a new dual dependency. First, there is the debt. The average MBA debt in the United States is $66,000, and for elite programs like Wharton, it easily exceeds $140,000. Second, there is the psychological trap. You have invested so much time and money that you are now convinced you deserve that position and that bonus, making you an even more compliant and predictable element of the system. Higher education in the United States functions as an upgrade within the exact same category trap. You pay massive amounts of money for the right to sell a more expensive Type A hour to the same class of employers. Systemic dependency does not vanish. It is simply rebranded as career growth. Look at a 2018 Wharton MBA graduate. Carrying $140,000 in debt, he secures a vice president position on Wall Street with a $250,000 salary. He produces Type A hours at a premium price, but the moment the billing stops, his income drops to zero just as fast as an hourly Amazon warehouse worker in New Jersey. The problem persists under a new name. Career success is merely a more expensive form of the same systemic dependency. The individual has simply paid more for a more beautiful cage. So you have accepted that the type of hour is critical. That is step one. But it immediately uncovers a deeper, more profound question. Where do your ideas of what is possible even come from? What defines your standard of a reasonable income or an acceptable risk? The answer lies in a mechanism operating entirely without your permission. In The Prince, Machiavelli was crystal clear. You can judge a ruler's intelligence by the people around him. If his advisors are weak, the ruler is weak, regardless of his own talents. Your social circle consists of your invisible advisors, and they dictate your strategy even when you do not realize it. This is the mechanism of invisible normalization. Your financial standards are not shaped by conscious choice, but through years of averaging out with those closest to you. What feels like a personal judgment or an internal compass is actually the internalized average of the beliefs of the 5 people you spend the most time with. You mistake someone else's calibration for your own independent judgment. This is not philosophy, it is statistics. A 2022 study from Harvard, led by economist Raj Chetty, proved this with chilling precision. An American's likelihood of rising to a higher income quintile directly correlates with the proportion of their social connections within that quintile. This proximity effect proved to be a statistically stronger driver of economic mobility than education level or even IQ. Your circle of contacts is not just a social environment, it is a mathematical limit. And this is where a truth far worse than the initial premise is revealed. You did not just fail to choose your environment consciously. You did not even know that your environment was choosing your financial ceiling for you, setting invisible boundaries on your ambitions. Your entire financial sovereignty was built on the foundation of other people's standards. Your sovereignty of judgment was an illusion from the very start. Becoming aware of the proximity problem triggers a standard, almost automatic response. I will attend networking events, join business clubs, and aggressively build my network. It sounds logical. It sounds proactive. But Machiavelli warned that fortune favors those who rely on their own strength, rather than those who gather allies for the sake of appearance. Allies without real interdependence are not an architecture of power, they are just theatrical props. Most networking events are a trap of horizontal averaging. Conferences, meetups, and business breakfasts aggregate people of the exact same level. All those LinkedIn connections and business card exchanges create a glossy illusion of expanding your horizon, when in reality, you are just sinking deeper into the same average tier. Standard networking reproduces the same proximity trap, just under a new, more active brand. You collect hundreds of contacts at your own level and call it networking. But vertical displacement requires selective architecture with asymmetric access, not volume. Imagine a typical startup conference in Austin or San Francisco. A room of 500 early-stage founders trading business cards. Their proximity is completely horizontal. Their collective calibration does not shift by even a single %. Now, compare that to the Y Combinator office hours model, where a single conversation with a partner of Paul Graham's caliber can recalibrate a founder's entire strategy. The proximity problem has not disappeared. It has simply rebranded as networking. You are busier, more socially active, but your financial ceiling has not budged an inch. Realizing this double trap, Type A hours and horizontal calibration, demands a cold operational shift, not another burst of frantic activity. Machiavelli called this relying on your own forces, building your own strength as the only sustainable foundation of power, independent of the mercy of others. Establishing vertical proximity is the literal creation of such a strategic asset. It is a fundamental shift from passive averaging to actively architecting your own field. You stop being a product of your environment and begin designing your environment as a calibrated tool for specific outcomes. You become the architect who sets the constants in your own equation. The proximity protocol is built on 5 measurable tools. First, paid access to closed environments with a high financial barrier. You do not pay for the content. You pay for the gate that filters out those unwilling to invest. Second, a service-first posture. You find someone 2 levels above you and offer them a highly specific, useful service with no strings attached. This creates a debt of gratitude that money cannot buy, opening doors locked to everyone else. Third, public intellectual output. Your analysis and content act as a magnet, naturally attracting high-caliber individuals while repelling those you do not need. Fourth, a calculated reduction in time spent with contacts pulling your calibration down. This is not a dramatic breakup. It is a cold reallocation of your most precious resource, time. And fifth, asymmetric outreach. One deeply researched, highly personalized message per week to an individual operating at the exact heights you want to reach. Look at Brian Chesky of Airbnb in 2009. He used service-based proximity in its purest form. He personally visited early hosts to photograph their apartments for free, gaining direct entry to the operational network of San Francisco property owners who were levels above him. This was not exchanging business cards at a Marriott hotel. This was an architecture of asymmetric value exchange, inserting himself directly into the operations of those whose world he needed to access. Every successfully executed element of this protocol expands your radius of refusal. You gain access to opportunities you can reject, not because you are afraid or cannot afford them, but because you have a vastly superior alternative. Sovereignty is built by accumulating options, not placing single, desperate bets. Even after understanding the mechanics of time categories and the environment trap, most people make one final, fatal mistake. They act immediately. They jump at any opportunity that seems slightly better than the last, desperate to make up for lost time. But this is the final mechanism of the system, designed to guarantee your defeat. Machiavelli described this through the concept of the right moment, the unique opportunity that you do not create, but must recognize and exploit. Analyzing the actions of Cesare Borgia, he revealed the core truth. 9 months of absolute inaction and strategic positioning, followed by a single surgical strike that eliminated 4 rivals simultaneously. Power is born of patience, not activity. Modern American financial culture is the absolute antithesis of this discipline. It generates a non-stop stream of urgency, FOMO, the window is closing, act now. You are trained to react to every signal, draining your capital, your attention, and your emotional reserves on a series of mediocre bets that add up to one big average life. A true fat pitch comes once a decade. It is an asymmetric opportunity with exponential upside, emerging right inside your circle of competence during a temporary market inefficiency. A person who has exhausted their resources on mediocre bets is physically unable to pivot when that moment arrives. Most American men watched exactly such moments pass in 2009, 2020 or 2022, but lack the capital or the conviction to enter. Look at the US commercial real estate market in March of 2009. Prices plunged 40%, liquidity dried up, and everyone sold in a panic. The investors who kept their powder dry, like Blackstone and private operators with liquid capital, built fortunes in 18 months. The losers were not stupid. They were simply too busy servicing their mediocre positions, bought in moments of manufactured urgency. And here is the worst part. You did not just miss the moment. Your activity, which you mistook for progress, was the very mechanism that stripped away your leverage when it mattered most. Recognizing the trap of mediocre bets is not a call to inaction. It is a transition to the operational architecture of waiting as an active discipline. Machiavelli saw this as the essence of virtue, not impulsive reaction, but the strategically calculated deployment of power at the exact right moment. He drew a sharp line between recklessness, action without opportunity, and genuine mastery, action that perfectly aligns with the right moment. This is a shift from reactive to cumulative logic. Instead of responding to every market signal, you build a reserve architecture. Financial, a liquid reserve equal to 6, or ideally 12 months of expenses, completely removed from any market instruments, sitting as dry powder. Operational, ruthlessly narrowing your active bets down to a single core area of competence. Analytical, a weekly, almost ritualistic monitoring of one specific market or asset class that you know better than anyone else. The waiting protocol consists of 3 measurable tools. First, a liquid reserve. At least 20% of your total investable capital is held permanently outside the market, not as insurance, but as a weapon of strike. Second, a fat pitch map. A written registry of 3 to 5 specific assets under constant observation with predetermined entry triggers. And third, the abstinence ratio. The ratio of rejected mediocre opportunities to accepted ones, with a target of 4 to 1. Warren Buffett held $147 billion in cash by mid-2023, despite public criticism of his inaction. Not because he saw no opportunities, but because not a single one met all 3 fat pitch criteria simultaneously. In 2022, he deployed a record $51 billion in a single quarter as the market slid. Your liquid reserve and your pitch map expand your radius of refusal to the absolute maximum. You gain the physical, not just intellectual, capacity to say no to mediocre deals because you have a loaded, structured alternative waiting for its hour. These 3 distinct protocols, the category of the hour, vertical proximity, and strategic waiting, are not a random collection of tactical tricks. They are the core components of a single operating system for personal sovereignty. Machiavelli insisted that institutional stability always outlasts individual charisma. The survivors are not those who act brilliantly in a single moment, but those who build systems that function regardless of circumstances. This represents a fundamental shift from isolated actions to a cohesive systemic architecture, where all 3 protocols reinforce each other. Vertical proximity grants you access to information about fat pitches before the market ever catches wind of them. Type B and C hours generate liquid reserves without draining your attention. The waiting protocol preserves your accumulated capital for a single, devastating, asymmetric strike. An integrated system compounds both financially and strategically, with each element multiplying the efficiency of the others. Look at the architecture of Sam Zell from the 1970s to 2007. He built Type B and C assets through REIT structures, deliberately surrounded himself with operators far above the market average, held liquidity, and struck at the absolute peak, selling equity office properties for $39 billion. 3 protocols working in perfect harmony. Your radius of refusal becomes absolute. You walk away from the employment system entirely, not out of ideology, but from an architectural position of pure strength. Every mechanism has been named, every protocol laid bare. The intellectual heavy lifting is complete, and only one thing remains. Machiavelli concludes The Prince not with a piece of advice, but with a cold observation. Fortune favors the active, not those who merely understand. Understanding that is not converted into action within 48 hours is statistically identical to complete ignorance. It evaporates, leaving behind nothing but the bitter taste of cynicism and self-justification. You have 2 paths ahead, and they require an identical amount of effort. The first is to continue producing Type A hours inside someone else's system, living by someone else's calibration, and hoping for a random fat pitch you have neither the capital nor the readiness to catch. The second is to start building your own architecture today, right now, with a single, irreversible action. Map out your own fat pitches. Write down 3 assets you truly understand. Define 3 measurable entry triggers. Commit 1 hour a week to monitoring. It will take you 90 minutes. That is the first brick in the foundation of your own strategic forces. The system is not waiting. Fortune is not waiting. You are either building your own architecture, or you are a piece of someone else's. Most of those listening right now will close this window and go back to servicing their debts. They are comfortable in their cage. But if something inside you has shifted, subscribe. This channel is not designed for entertainment. It is built for architecting sovereignty, without compromise and without noise. Until next time.